back on the show to talk a little bit of Shelby Harris stuff that was in the news that was pretty interesting stuff, and OTA talk, how the team's sort of looking out there, just with Mike McDonald, that whole new coaching staff, and we're gonna talk about some of the exciting players that we're interested to look out for, and get Jackson's take on that as well, and then kind of go over the schedule and kind of look at that and see how we're going to sort of fare, and especially with Mike and a couple of the teams that are coming in with high power offenses, kind of really showcase some of the defense that he's trying to install. So yeah, Bryce, I'm super pumped right now to have Jackson on, and this was recorded prior to, just let everybody know, so I won't be appearing in the first part of the pod, but then later on in the pod there'll be all three of us jumping in and chopping stuff up. So, but yeah, this was exciting, and Jackson's always a great guest.
Yeah, man, it was a lot of fun talking with Jackson. Everyone in our listener group can judge who the better host is of the show now between me and Ryan, because my vote's to Ryan. I struggled with that, but no, it's going to be good stuff, everyone. And yeah, we get into a bunch of interesting topics and talk a bunch of the players that we're looking forward to seeing this season, this off season, and just kind of the overall encompassing of what's been going on this off season for the Hawks. So it was a lot of fun to chop it up with Jackson again.
Yeah. And guys, really quickly, if you like what you're hearing and watching, go down, hit that subscribe button for us, and hit the like button and notification button. That really helps out the channel a lot, and share the channel and videos and stuff like that. It really goes a long way. And everybody that has been doing that and subscribed to the channel, we can't thank you enough. We really, really appreciate it, and appreciate your support. And we keep wanting to bring this content to you guys. So yeah, anyways, we appreciate everyone who has been supporting the channel. So coming up next, Jacson Bevens from Cigar Thoughts.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. What a run! Marshawn Lynch, get off me! DK.
Hey, it's John Schneider with Seattle Seahawks.
That's the result you're going to get.
This offense, just in general. I mean, you had
To
a
me,
guy
just
like
watching
that.
his film, he seems more of a back.
Just the presence he's got in that pocket, the way he throws the football. Rust days, man, all the scrutiny that line was under.
This Monday night's big. All right, guys, on the other side of the break here, we've got Jacson Bevens from Cigar Thoughts coming back to join us here on the Hawk Zone Rundown. Jackson, how's it going, man?
Great, man. Appreciate y'all having me back.
Yeah, man, we love having you on this show, and we can't wait to get your insight on the Seahawks draft, the OTAs going on, and a couple more other things we'll talk about today. So speaking of that, let's kind of start off with something here that kind of just happened recently, Jackson. Shelby Harris, our D tackle that was here and a part of the Russell Wilson trade, made some interesting comments, I'd say, over social media and on a podcast the other day, basically saying how he was so not looking forward to coming to Seattle, and it was purgatory, and that, he was just kind of down in the dumps about making the trade, and the whole city was depressing. So what were your take? What was your take on that?
Yeah, I'll admit that, I was catching up on all of this here shortly before we went on, and I might have a little bit of a different take on it after seeing all the quotes. Honestly, it doesn't bother me too much. He talked about how, his family had just started to get settled in Denver, and Denver's a killer freaking city, man. Denver is so rad. And, we forget a lot of these guys are in the mid-20s, and they're trying to find this stability. And here he thought they had a good roster, and now they're getting the quarterback, and everyone's excited, and he wants to be a part of that. And it's like, no, actually, as part of bringing this quarterback in, you got to go. And, he said at one point in the interview that, basically anywhere except for Miami or Los Angeles would have been depressing to him in the moment. I didn't see a lot in there that like trashed the organization. He says depressing city. I mean, look, if you're not used to Northwest winters, man, you get 40, 50 gray days in a row. Like, I get it. I work in real estate. I help people find homes here who haven't been from the area, and vice versa, of course. And there's a lot of people that are like, man, these winners, they get to you. So I didn't have a huge problem with it. I think that that's just a guy being honest, and I want to see more of that from our athletes. I love the city of Seattle, but like, it's also not for everybody. And I don't think any city is. And so, yeah, I thought he was a pretty good player. I thought he was, helped make that deal work for Seattle, but yeah, no hard feelings.
Yeah, no, I was of like when I first saw the initial like snippet that everyone gives you, how social media is, they give you like a minute, 30 seconds. When you watch the snippet, it does come across a certain way. But then after reading a couple articles, I kind of came away similar to you, where it's like, we do forget these guys have families. They're trying to figure out their lives in this crazy world that we know nothing about when it comes to professional sports, except what we see from the outside. Mm-hmm. And yeah, no, and like you said, like we live in Vancouver, me and Ryan, so we're not that far from you. It can be depressing here, man. Like I look at now, we've just passed the May long weekend, and we've been basically dealing with rain for the last like 6 or 7 days. So it hasn't been the greatest weather conditions as it is. So yeah, no, I agree with you on that. So with that being said, let's kind of touch in on the draft a little bit, because we haven't had you on since the Seahawks went through their draft and that whole process. So what were your takeaways from the draft class and how that whole situation went down for the Seattle Seahawks?
Yeah, well, I think overall it was a really unique draft in 3 different ways, at least as far as the modern NFL is concerned. One, the run on offensive players, first 14 picks were all offense. I think there had never been more than like 8 or 9 to start a draft before. And when you're Seattle and outside of interior offensive line, your offense is pretty set. Excuse me. I think that set up really well for them, because Byron Murphy, reports come out after the draft. A lot of teams had him as the number 1 player on the board. Some people, number 2, number 3. Both John Boyle and Brady Henderson did some really good behind the scenes reporting about the Seahawks draft process. And it does sound like, Murphy was either 1 or 2 for them. So in a lot of years, a player like that is going in the top 10, if not the top 6 or 7. So to get him at 16 is pretty remarkable. And it is the combination of a good player at a premium position and at a position of need. And when I say premium position, I'm just talking about how the NFL doles out contracts. You look at what the franchise tag numbers are, which takes the average of the top 5 players at the position. When a player gets franchise tagged, that's kind of how I look at the value of a position. If a guy's going to be really good, D tackle is up there. And so I'm not anti running back. I'm not anti guard. I'm not anti safety. But the delta in savings, if you have a good one on a rookie contract versus what you would have to pay a commensurate player on the open market, is bigger at positions like D-line and corner and wide receiver and quarterback. And tackle. And so I thought that was a really, really good get. And also I do think it's kind of cool. You're bringing in this defensive coach. He's kind of one of the premier defensive minds on the planet right now. And to start your draft off with a defensive player, I think was kind of a cool message to send also.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I was kind of, we did a live draft preview kind of show on the second of round 2 and round 3. And me and Ryan were kind of talking back and forth about the fact that we were able to get Byron Murphy. Every time I did a mock draft this year, he was gone. He was always gone in the top 10. And so I was kind of going like, I'd love him, but I didn't think realistically he was going to be there until, like you said, that run of 14 offensive players right off the board. And I went, okay, like we actually have a shot at getting someone. Now, I think it would have been interesting if potentially Michael Penix had been sitting there at that point in time, what Seattle would have done at that particular moment. But I definitely love the pick. I think he comes in, like you said, Mike McDonald gets kind of, in some respects on the defensive line, a bit of a Swiss Army knife himself, because as you watch for the Texas film, Byron Murphy can kind of move up and down that line a little bit and do some different things. So I think he gives us a little bit more versatility on that front now with, they say Draymond Jones is moving to edge outside linebacker. Chenna's back. We got Jaron Reed, who came off a great year last year for us, and still we have Big Cat Leonard Williams in there. So I definitely think it's going to add to that defense and make it a little bit more difficult for teams to necessarily pick a guy to double team on that line, because if we hadn't got Byron Murphy, I think Leonard Williams would have seen a fair share of double teams in that interior, because teams would have been worried more about him. Now it might free up one or the other.
Yeah, I agree with that, and also, I mean, I really like the player. The one thing that I kind of need to see from him is he played a pretty low snap share at Texas, and Texas had a lot of talent. I mean, Devondre Sweat was also really highly graded defensive lineman coming out of the same school, playing at the same time as Byron Murphy. He was playing like 50% of the snaps, and maybe he can do more. I hope he can. Texas, in a perfect world, you have a ton of talent there, and you can rotate guys out and have fresh legs on the interior defensive line. In the NFL, you don't have 120-man rosters like you have in college. You got 46 that you dress for games, and only so many of them can be defensive linemen. So I want to see that this guy can play 60, 70% of snaps. We'll see if he can. But in terms of like per snap production and his win rates on both pass blocking and run blocking plays was really, really impressive. So, and I think a lot of the stuff that he does in terms of the combination of leverage and quickness is the type of thing that typically does translate from college to the NFL. So yeah, I think he's got an opportunity to be really good. And honestly, I think that if he is as good as we hope, he's good enough to translate Seattle's interior defensive line from a liability to a strength.
Yeah, no, 100%. And obviously we know from last year, the run game and run defense was a big issue for us. And, potentially with him being in the middle, if it translates, which hopefully it does, and Leonard Williams being back and Jaron Reed, and someone I don't think gets talked enough that's going to help with that, run defense is Jonathan Hankins coming from Dallas. It should be a better unit overall there. So moving off of Murphy, we obviously didn't have a pick in round 2. That was Leonard Williams from our trade last year.
That's right.
But we ended up getting the best rated pure guard in the draft in Christian Haynes. What was your thoughts when Seattle was able to scoop him up in that 3rd round?
Yeah, I didn't think he'd be there. I thought he was going to be a 2nd round player. He's one of the guys that I really liked, but in our own shows leading up to the draft, I didn't talk about him much, simply because I didn't think he was a 1st round player. I think there were a couple of guards that were worthy of 1st round consideration. I didn't put Haynes in that mold, but I thought for sure he was going to be like an early day 2 guy. And then as we got to like pick 75 and he was still on the board, I started to get my hopes up a little bit. And then when he was there at 81, I was like, please do not fuck this up. Like, just take the guy. This is, again, like the way this draft fell, pushing a player like Christian Haynes to 81 wouldn't happen in most drafts, but we saw so many quarterbacks and so many tackles and so many wide receivers and so many corners, which are all those premium positions that teams are going to prioritize if, the prospect deserves it. And there were so many of those guys that we really saw players at running back and off-ball linebacker and guard and safety get pushed down. And, another thing that really stood out to me about this draft, especially at the top half of the 1st round, was there were no trade backs. We saw one trade back in the first 16 picks, and it was Minnesota moving up 1 spot, with the Jets. So I feel like when the draft is falling that way, I think unless you're picking in like the top 5, and even if your team is picking the top 5, a lot of fans, they want to see that trade down. It's like, oh no, just move back and get up picks. And it's like, well, yeah, sure, that's great, but like you got to find somebody else who's willing to trade you that to move up. And I think a lot of teams saw it the way Seattle did and was just like, yeah, there's still a lot of good players here. I'm going to wait and see who falls to me. My favorite defensive player in the draft is Quinyon Mitchell, cornerback out of Toledo, who's like a carbon copy of Devin Witherspoon. And he went like 30th to the Eagles or whatever. So, that's a top 10 player in most drafts. That's just kind of how this draft fell. And Christian Haynes was one of those guys that I think would have gone 20 picks earlier in a lot of drafts, if not even earlier than that. And he didn't, and Seattle didn't overthink it. So yeah, Seattle's drafted a lot of guards over the last 12, 15 years. and they've all had a lot in common, which is that they win in the run game at college, and don't profile strongly in the pass game. It was encouraging to see them take a guy that actually won. Like, his strength was in being able to set pass protection, because Seattle has struggled with pressure up the middle so much for a long time. I mean, a lot of teams do. There's just not that many really good NFL offensive linemen, but Seattle has really struggled with that. And last year was probably the worst we've ever seen. And so to have someone that you feel like once he gets his feet underneath him can settle in as someone who can protect the middle of the pocket, I think that goes a long way.
No, yeah, I agree. The one thing, how you're talking about the draft and the way that it fell, it couldn't have fallen really any better for Seattle without, them having to make a trade back or anything like that.
Totally.
And so, like, with what we talked about a little bit before we came on this show was, what if it had been reversed and Seattle, say at 16, had taken a Troy Fautanu as a guard, or a BB, or, a Graham Barton that was there? I don't know if the draft falls in Seattle's favor going forward in a lot of ways, because I don't see us getting a plug-and-play player like a Christian Haynes type, where we potentially are starting him day one at right guard, or he's competing to start there over Anthony Bradford, in the same way, because I didn't see any defensive linemen that were going to have the same kind of impact being there in the third round for us. So I think Seattle went about it the right way. Take the, in theory, hopefully blue chip defensive player in Byron Murphy. And by the way the draft fell, get your plug and play guard in the third round.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think interior defensive line talent, just like in most drafts, dries up a lot faster than interior offensive line talent does. So I'm glad it fell that way. Like a lot of people, I had Fautanu kind of earmarked as a guy I would like to see Seattle draft. I sort of had a short list of Murphy, Fautanu, and Latu out of UCLA. And Brady Henderson did a great job with his article, kind of going behind the scenes with the draft process. And he basically said Fautanu and Latu weren't even considerations just because of their injury history. And I'm okay with that, because Seattle's offensive coordinator and offensive line coach were Fautanu's offensive coordinator and offensive line coach. And so, if they felt like there were better options there, I trust them in that. But also just from an opportunity cost standpoint, which is the other side of the conversation that I think gets left out of the discourse a lot, is like, okay, you want this person over that person. That's great. But what is your cost, right? It's the whole Michael Penix thing in Atlanta. It's like, is Michael Penix worthy of a top 10 pick? I don't have a problem with it. I like Penix. I think he has the potential to be a really good quarterback at the next level. But if you're the Falcons and you just gave $100 million guaranteed to a quarterback, and you haven't touched a quarterback on defense in 5 years, I mean, you've had the lowest pressure rate in the NFL for half a decade, your opportunity cost of taking that quarterback there is really high, right? You're not taking a Dallas Turner. You're not taking a Byron Murphy. And so for Seattle, I think that they played both sides of that coin really well, where they were able to take a player that you could make a really strong argument was the best player available, both in the first and the third rounds, but also at positions of need. It's just really rare that it happens that way. And as fans, we tend to hyper focus on, okay, what are the perceived weaknesses of this team? That's who you need to go get. At the end of the day, it comes down to how much total talent do you have on your roster, because there's going to be so many changes over the course of the offseason and during the season with injuries. I don't mind a team loading up at positions of strength. Like if Seattle had taken Quinyon Mitchell in the first round, I would have been okay with it, even though cornerback already profiles as the strength of this team, because again, at the end of the day, it's about having as many players who can impact the game on your team as possible. It's just that when it lines up and you get that player and it's also a position where you do really need somebody there, that's a really cool thing. And that's how it shook out for Seattle, which was awesome.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like I look at the last 2 years of our first 2 picks, last year being Weatherspoon, JSN, this year is Byron Murphy and Christian Haynes. I don't know if you can say those 4 picks couldn't have gone any better for Seattle in a lot of ways, considering, like we just talked about, the value that they got, the players' position of need. Those are kind of things that I look at and I go, the drafting strategy has changed in Seattle, because I think of how many years we took like Bruce Irvin, where everyone was kind of like, who in the world is Bruce Irvin? Or we trade all the way back and take a Malik McDowell or Jermaine Ifedi, and we kind of reach for guys. It seems that draft culture and draft philosophies kind of change now, where we're going to try and take, a position of need, but we're not going to stretch ourselves out and reach on a guy. We'll take the best available player if he's there.
Yeah. And I, John Schneider's been pretty open about how he got out over his skis after, his first 3 years in Seattle might be in terms of AAV, which is, essentially football's version of WAR, in terms of trying to find a comprehensive statistic for a player's performance. Seattle's 2010 through 2012 drafts are the highest AAV draft stretch any 3 years of any team since they started tracking it. And yeah, I think he got a little loose after that. And I don't think he drafted very well for the next 4 or 5 years. But I'll even go a year further back when their first 2 picks were Charles Cross and Boya Mafe. This is 3 straight years of using those top 2 picks on what appear to be really good players at, positions that you really need them. So I think he's on a bit of a heater right now.
So with the rest of the draft, Jackson, what did you take away from the rest of Seattle's draft through rounds 4 and 5 there, or 5 and 7, I should say?
Yeah, I think it was just dart throws at areas of need. I like Therese Knight, the linebacker out of UTEP. I think fundamentally he's got some things that need to be sharpened up. He plays really high. He's not great at getting off of blocks, but he's an excellent tackler. And Seattle's been pretty shitty at tackling for a while now. So, he led all of FBS in solo tackles. I don't think that is an empty stat. I think tackles can be an empty stat for sure, as evidenced by Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks leading the NFL in tackles on bad defenses. But I think that when you're talking about 130 FBS teams and they each have 4 linebackers that are getting significant snaps, if you're number 1 out of those 500-600 players, like that's really something. So I like that. I think AJ Barner is a good Will Dissly, Colby Parkinson depth replacement at tight end out of Michigan. He's kind of a do whatever the coaches ask of you. He's had some games where he's had really nice receiving totals, and I wouldn't call him like a dynamic playmaker, but can run his route proficiently and catch the ball when it's thrown to him. But I think he profiles as just being like a blocker you can count on, and it gives you the opportunity to run multiple tight end sets, because Seattle's been giving 3 tight ends a lot of snaps the last couple of years, and then 2 of those guys ended up elsewhere. So I liked that. Lamea out of Utah is a player that I kind of had circled that I was hoping they'd get on day 3. So it's cool to see him drafted. I think he's depth. I mean, it's day 3. If you get a starter out of day 3, that's not like an emergency starter. That's a huge win. That should not be your expectation. You're hoping to find guys that are proficient enough at what they do that they can perform if called upon. But it's so rare to find game changers on day 3, and every draft class has them. And so then everybody else wants them, but you're like, okay, yeah, there was a Puka Nacua that came out on day 3 or whoever it is. It's like, well, yeah, but there was also like 200 other picks that weren't that. And so if you get a great player that way, and Seattle got lucky, right? Getting Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Doug Baldwin and players like that late in the draft that really became big time contributors. Reek Woolen a couple years ago, like it happens, but I don't think that should be the expectation. So I liked all 3 of those picks. I've been learning a lot about the Auburn corners. They seem fine. Again, probably depth. I think probably one of them makes the team. And then, you get Michael Jarrell, the tackle out of Finley. That's depth. It's just kind of what you're hoping for, right? Like these guys you hope make the team. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was just sound process from Seattle in the draft, which is great. Like I don't need you to go out there and like try and outthink the NFL necessarily. Like you got to do what's best for your team. And I think John Schneider was trying to outthink the NFL for a few years, and it seems like he's just kind of been really disciplined the last 3 drafts, which is encouraging. And I think that this top to bottom is probably my favorite Seahawks draft in a while.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely think it's one of my favorite drafts that they've had in a while. I also think the one thing that we kind of, like you just touched on, those last couple of rounds there, really we're looking for depth, guys to push guys that are already on this roster for a spot. And I think one thing that we always kind of forget about a little bit, at least I know people I talk to about it, we forget about the year before draft, and those guys still have like a Derek Hall, for example. Like people were, screaming for us to get an edge. We need, rushers and stuff. Derek Hall last year, I don't know if it was so much a physical ability that he was struggling or more of a scheme issue that he struggled with last year in Seattle. So I'm actually looking forward to, these guys that were guys that we picked in the, later rounds last year to come in and make an impact this year, Derek Hall being one of them. The corner picks I found were interesting. Like I like Tyrese Knight. I think he, with Mike McDonald, who could be, as some people have quoted, the linebacker whisperer, could get something seriously out of Tyrese Knight, considering both of our linebackers that we signed are on 1-year deals in Dotson and Baker. So I was interested by the corner picks because considering how loaded our room is with Mike Jack being back, Trey Brown, Reek Woolen, even Artie Burns, Witherspoon, all those guys, to add 2 more to it, I think was kind of interesting. So it kind of makes me wonder if some of those guys that we have on our roster currently maybe going to be in serious camp battles for their spots. But the one thing I thought Seattle actually did better than even in the later rounds is their UDFA class, which we know John Schneider and that group work extremely hard on getting those undrafted free agents, and they've unearthed some gems in the years, Doug Baldwin being one, Jermaine Kearse, even Michael Bennett way back. So I'm kind of interested to see, like one guy that I've heard a few good things out just watching some of the beat reporter stuff coming through on Twitter is Greenfield, the right tackle, is someone that they're saying could push for a roster spot. So I think it could be really interesting to see how that UDFA class and that last couple rounds of the draft really kind of shape up the depth of our team this year.
Yeah, I mean, with UDFAs, like it's great if they become Doug Baldwin and lead the NFL in touchdown receptions 1 year, but that's not really what you should be expecting from these UDFAs. There's a reason they didn't get their names called with 250 some odd selections, right? A lot of them are good players, but the NFL, that is a really, really, really tough fraternity to earn your way into. What you're really hoping for is like a Jake Bobo, someone that you can just put in and count on, and maybe they become a fan favorite or whatever, but like it's just okay, can you play 30% of the snaps and not fuck things up for everybody else? Like that's what you're hoping to get out of those guys. So yeah, I mean, Greenfield, sure, if he makes the roster, can't have too many tackles. Like I hope he's good. I'm not putting a ton of stock into any of those guys yet, except for maybe Jack Westover, tight end out of UW. And again, this is a guy who played for Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff at UW. They know him. I thought that he was just a great kind of security blanket type of player, and you're going to need that third tight end. And if he can be that guy, I think that there's value there. But if of all the UDFAs, if any of them were to like really make an impact in year one, he's probably the one that I think sees the most amount of snaps, barring injury. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I hope they're all awesome.
Yeah, no, I would say I agree with you. Westover, Greenfield's the one I've kind of kept a bit of an eye on just because of Abe Lucas's injury. We did bring George Fant back, but we don't really have a lot of tackle depth, I would say, as if we lose, Cross or Lucas. Yes, we have Stone Forsythe. He did an okay job last year. So if they're, Jarrell and Greenfield can come in and push one of those guys out and are a depth backup, great. I'm happy with that. And I agree with you. UDFAs, you can't bank on a Doug Baldwin to pop up and be like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to turn into one of the greatest receivers in Seahawk history. Right. The other guy that I'm kind of interested out of that UDFA class, though, is Easton Gibbs, the linebacker out of Wyoming. So because our linebacker room is kind of small depth-wise, and yes, we got John Radigan and Drake Thomas there, he's a guy that I would like to, see potentially, whether he makes the practice squad or is a special teams guy, because everything I've seen and watched from him in Wyoming, he gives me vibes of Logan. I think it's Logan Wilson, the linebacker out of Cincinnati there. So, you know, I kind of hope that that's what we get, is someone that can come in and contribute on special teams and eventually push for a starting or role spot or something like that eventually. But yeah, no, overall, I agree with you, Jackson. I think this was probably in the last 3 years, top to bottom, one of my more favorite Seahawk draft classes.
Yeah. I think they did a really, really nice job.
So speaking of that, and we'll kind of keep it tied in with the draft here, what were your thoughts of our lovely divisional opponents in the Cardinals, 49ers, and Rams? Because, man, did the rest of our division draft pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't help us, I don't think.
Yeah. I thought the Rams getting the 2 Florida State defensive linemen was, I think, just as a football fan, that was cool to see. You know, for those listening, you played sports growing up, whatever, like you build a bond with these people. And when you get to college, you know, I mean, I wasn't D1, but I played baseball, football at the Division III level. And like, you put in so much time. It's like a full-time job. You put in so much time sweating and competing with these guys. You do form friendships. And then like, okay, you're making the jump to the NFL. Like I've never had the opportunity to do that. I don't know what that's like. It's got to be intimidating. It's a new city. It's a totally new set of demands. It's a new amount of money. It's a new amount of expectations and all these things. And if all of a sudden you got a guy that like you've been doing that with, who's also there, like you have one friend in the building and it's in that same position group, and you guys have been spending the extra 10 to 15 hours a week together with those drills and with those film sessions. Like I thought that was really cool. They're not going to make up for the loss of Aaron Donald. Like Aaron Donald's the best defensive player since Ed Reed, in my opinion. And, you know, or Ray Lewis, Troy Polamalu, like he's that good. And I think the Rams got worse simply because they don't have Aaron Donald anymore. I did like the Blake Corum pick. I'm more pro running back than a lot of people. But yeah, I think as long as the Rams have Sean McVay and Matt Stafford, they're going to win 9 games at least. Niners, it's so tough with the Niners draft because they remind me a lot of the Seahawks, kind of like 2013 through 2015. There's just not starting spots available. The 49ers have the best roster in the NFL. They don't have weaknesses, really. They didn't really lose anybody this offseason. There's a lot of talk about Debo or Ayuk getting traded, which if that had happened, you could see Ricky Pearsall being an immediate contributor. But yeah, I mean, if you're a Niners fan, you hope these guys find a spot on the roster and can produce when called upon, but like they're pretty set. I think the Niners are the best team in the NFL. And then the Cardinals, man, I'm telling you, 2025 on, Cardinals are going to be a headache. I'm a huge Kyler Murray guy. I think he is so good. Rich Gannon, you know, for all the jokes, it kind of reminds me of like when Dan Campbell got hired and everyone was making fun of him because he was just like so goofy in his first press conference. And it's like, okay, like here go the Lions again. I think it was kind of the same thing with Rich Gannon. He has like that Kendall Roy vibe to him, and everyone's like, okay, well, it's just the Cardinals. They're going to stink again. No, man, they played hard for that dude last year, and they started winning a lot of games when Kyler came back, and they did that without any wide receivers. And then you had Marvin Harrison, who, you know, profiles as a guy with the potential to be one of the greats, and then 5 other picks in the top 90. I mean, the Cardinals are well coached. They've got a very good quarterback, and they added a lot of talent. I mean, the NFC West's going to be really tough for the next few years for sure.
Yeah, no, I look at the NFC West now kind of how it was when Pete showed up. All the teams started to kind of reload. The Cardinals ended up with Arians and Palmer and were a headache for us for about 5 or 6 years. You know, the Rams at that point were kind of the ugly stepsister in the division. Yes, Jeff Fisher was there, but they always gave us a headache, and we could never seem to win both games versus them. And then you had, you know, the Niners with Jim Harbaugh for that time period. And I agree with you. I still think the Niners have the best roster in all of football. It is getting older, for one, which I think bodes well for us. But yeah, no, when I looked at the drafting of a lot of the teams in the NFL, I looked at the NFC West and said, if I was to give that entire division a grade, I'd probably give that entire division a B+A grade for their draft across the board, because the Niners are trying to get depth and potentially fill holes that could present themselves in a few years. So they're not really going to get, and where they're drafting, like we all know, there's usually only 15 guys that are first round grades in most drafts.
Yep.
Then after that, you're kind of into round 2 grades, even though they're going in round 1. And so where they're always picking near the bottom of the draft anyways. The Rams, like, for me, I look at the Rams and wonder, yes, I know they've lost Aaron Donald, but like you said, with McVay and Stafford, Blake Corum there, which I think McVay is going to use him in ways we may not have seen from when he was in Michigan. I think the Rams might have a roster close enough to compete with the Niners. As crazy as that sounds, with Stafford there and McVay and obviously having Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, that whole team. And then, yeah, man, the Cardinals actually scare the living shit out of me. Kyler looked like, and this is what I can say, like when I watched Kyler the first couple of years, he looked like he was playing backyard football, like run around out of the fact that he could do it and was faster than everybody and then find somebody downfield, kind of like what Russ at some points would do for us in Seattle. Watching Kyler last year, Kyler looked like a quarterback. Like he wouldn't run out of necessity. He was dicing up defenses. They're 2 missed field goals away from beating us at the end of the year, basically.
He's fucking good, man. He's so good.
And
Kyler
they've
is so
got to
good.
give him weapons, like you said, Marvin Harrison now. And Gannon coaches a good defense. That's what he's known for. So now you look at, it's kind of interesting if you look at the way the division's now shaped. You have considerably the 2 best offensive minds in football in McVay and Shanahan. And when Gannon got hired out of the Eagles, he had one of the best defenses in the NFL, and that's why the Cardinals hired him. And now we've taken the guy that essentially had the best defense. So you have 2 of the best defensive minds in football and 2 of the best offensive minds in football now all colliding in one division. I think there's a good chance this year potentially there's 3 teams that come out of the NFC West for the playoffs.
Yeah, the NFC's tough, man. I was trying to predict who. I mean, AFC is tough too. NFL's so good right now. I mean, there's just a lot of really good teams right now. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. You look at the NFC North, it's like, I don't think the Bears are there yet, but they're headed in the right direction. And then you got the Lions, who my hot take is I think the Lions win more games than anybody else in the NFL this year. You had the Packers, who were unbelievable down the stretch. You've got the Vikings, who are 1 year removed from winning 13 games and I think have a lot of talent there. And then, the NFC South is probably weak, but the Cowboys are going to be good again. The Eagles are going to be good again, in the East. And then, it's just like, to your point, the NFC West, I mean, there's at least 3 good teams in an NFC West, and there might be 4 good there, could see 4 teams win 8+ games in that division this year. Playoff spots are going to be really difficult to come by in the NFC.
No, 100%. And I agree with you. I think Detroit, in my opinion, Detroit should have been in the Super Bowl last year. In that game, they shot themselves in the foot when they played the Niners. They had the Niners on the ropes in that game, and I think should have been in the Super Bowl. But yeah, it was funny. We had a guy on our show last week, and he came on with a hot take saying that he didn't think Seattle would win more than 7 games this year. And I kind of didn't say anything at the time, but the more I've watched, the more I've listened to Mike McDonald, the more that they did the stuff in the draft, I think Seattle's a better team now than they were when they finished last year, even though we've, had guys leave and stuff. I think with the changes we've made, I think there's a very good shot. Seattle right now currently is the 3rd best team in the division, but could push for that 2nd spot in the division if the cards line up for them this year.
Yeah. I mean, right now Vegas has Seattle's over/under at 7.5 wins, and I think that's just a little bit kind of the consensus. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's going to be growing pains with the coaching staff. The difference between being coordinator and head coach is massive. And then you look at defensive coordinator, you got a European football guy coming over to the NFL, and you look at your offensive coordinator and he's been a college coach. I mean, everybody is stepping into roles that are more elevated than anything they've ever been called upon to do before. And when you have an entire coaching staff doing that, there's going to be growing pains. I don't know that I think Pete Carroll was elite at the Monday through Saturday stuff. I do think the game had started to pass him by on Sundays. I'm more confident in Seattle's game day coaching, but as far as like the preparation and the culture building, that's going to be really difficult to equate. So I think from a coaching standpoint, it could go either way this season in terms of being better or worse overall. I look at the offense and pretty much everybody is back. It's pretty much the same offense as last year. And then you hope that Christian Haynes is good enough to improve the interior, the offensive line. I love Colby Parkinson. And I thought that he was valuable, and I thought that was a really nice deal that he got with the Rams. Will Dissly was fine, but like I don't think that really negatively impacts you too much. And I think Geno Smith is like somewhere between the 10th and 12th best quarterback in the NFL. So I think the offense from a talent standpoint is going to be just as good, or maybe even a little bit better, assuming that players like Jackson Smith and Jigba, and hopefully Cross and Lucas and Charbonnet and Walker, these young guys are able to take a step forward. I do think the defense is going to be interesting, and this is where I am just hoping to put a lot of faith in the coaching there. I think Mike Macdonald I think this defense is going to be a lot more disciplined than they've been. I think that they've been arguably the least disciplined defense in the NFL for like 4 years now. It's apparent in their inability to cover crossing routes. It's apparent in their inability to get off the field on third down. Their tackling has been poor. The pass rush has been really, really inconsistent. And I think a lot of it is they just played really, really sloppy defense. And that's not going to happen with Mike Macdonald. But Jordan Brooks is a really good player. Bobby Wagner is still a good player. We don't know what is Reek Woolen moving forward closer to rookie year Reek Woolen or second year Reek Woolen. And basically everyone outside of Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, and Devin Witherspoon is kind of on like a 1-year prove-it deal in Seattle, right? Like these aren't Mike Macdonald's guys, and none of them are really owed money after this year. So, I think everyone's going to be kind of playing for their future in Seattle on defense, and that can turn out to be really good, or it could be pretty bad. But I look at a team that's won 18 games over the last 2 years. I don't see a team that's worse. I predict that they'll win 9 games again this year. 10 wouldn't surprise me. 8 wouldn't surprise me. 7 would surprise me, though.
Yeah, no, I agree. 7 would surprise me. So after the break, we'll have Ryan jump in and join us here. And I've got a couple things to talk about with intriguing players in camp and a hot take about Reek Woolen that I think might get a couple people riled up. So we'll be back after this.
Guys, welcome back to the show. Jacson Bevens with us again. OTAs have been a kind of an interesting thing to keep our eye on now, since obviously Mike Macdonald, who you guys have been talking about before the break, just this whole new culture and what he's bringing. Obviously, he's had some, the press conference and just the way he's kind of doing things his way. So you're just keeping a closer eye, especially this year with OTAs. What's stood out for you so far? Your kind of couple biggest takeaways so far from OTAs.
I think the thing that's hardest for us as fans to grasp and really appreciate is how much structure OTAs require. And I think that this is like one of the true strengths of Pete Carroll was his ability to have a culture that created buy-in from players. Their practices are famous for their energy. He had, and this is something a lot of teams do now, but Pete Carroll was really early on is putting GPS trackers on all his players during practice, and they like go through after practice and they analyze like shit, like how fast did you get from one drill to the other, right? Like, are players walking between drills? Are they running? What are they doing? Like, that requires so much foresight, so much discipline, and so much structure. And I think that Mike Macdonald is wired to do that. But if you haven't done it before, that is a difficult thing to do. And you don't have an established voice yet. I mean, your title says head coach and your resume says that you're this great defensive mind, and that's all good. But if you show up to practice and players are wondering what they're supposed to do next, or coaches aren't picking up on their cues or whatever, players feel that. I mean, so many of these guys are coming out of these SEC, ACC, Pac-12, Big Ten schools that are running NFL programs with Hall of Fame coaches, and shit is dialed. And if your shit's not dialed, like, players feel that, and it undermines your credibility. So I think that's the biggest thing. The problem is we don't really have a way of analyzing that. And so, you know, it's going to be one of those things where 2-3 years down the line, we start to hear about that stuff. But to me, that's the biggest thing. As far as, you know, like individual players, I'll be completely honest. I'm only looking for two things, and I don't want to hear any of them. I don't want to hear injuries, and I don't want to hear about players struggling. I don't get too worked up about coaches saying that someone is looking great, because if you're an NFL player, you should be looking great in OTAs. So the two things that I'm kind of hyper focusing on in the offseason are there injuries, and, you know, are coaches disappointed in players? And it takes a lot to get a coach to say that a player is struggling. And so when you do hear that, I put a lot of stock into that. When someone says, oh, a player looks great, it's like, yeah, well, I mean, I hope so. Like, that's kind of the expectation. So yeah, for me, OTAs is just, I'm hoping for a minimum of bad news.
Yeah, no, I agree with Jackson. OTAs is more of a, hey, you know, let's hope that no one gets hurt. We don't get a significant injury to someone of importance that's going to, you know, be someone we're banking on this year to make a huge impact. And then for me, what I look at, though, and what I've been reading, especially with now, like you said, no more Pete Carroll, it's Mike McDonald. How's the structure of practice? What's different about it? And so, like they've said, there's no horn anymore to signal moving in and out of, and when practice is over. You know, there's no music blaring. Like, yeah, they've got some music going, but, you know, it's kind of interesting to, you know, hear that that's gone. And then the other thing that I really pay attention to, especially with the new coaching staff, is what are the veteran players saying, like a Tyler Lockett and guys that have been around the program for a while. And, you know, listening to them talk about Mike McDonald and Ryan Grubb, especially, and this whole new offense that's going in, and Gino even saying, you know, how much teaching there is going on, but how detail oriented this staff is, which to me, I find really interesting because, and I love Pete, but Pete was great, like you said, through Monday to Saturday, but game days kind of were starting to fade away on how good he could have been on game days. I'm really interested to see, like, Mike McDonald Monday to Saturday, because I think on game days they're going to be dialed in, but this whole new coaching staff, the thing I'm liking is hearing how detailed they are about things. Like, and like when they asked, I can't remember which reporter it was, asked Mike McDonald, and he goes, well, how much of the playbook's installed? And he goes, like, maybe 20%. He's like, we have to get a baseline, and then once everyone understands it, we'll add concepts to it, which to me is kind of a cool way of saying essentially, like, we're not going to be this crazy defense. We're just going to run a lot of concepts off of what we do really well and go from there. So that's kind of what I pick up out of OTAs is how they talk about the structure of what's going on. And then obviously anyone hurt, anyone disappointing, obviously we haven't heard any of that yet. So yeah, I agree. That's kind of the things I tend to focus on as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. And like you said, interesting comments from you know, guys like Lockett. Just, I think he used culture shock, just obviously completely different than what they were used to with Pete. Like Lockett, for example, all he has known is Pete Carroll, right? Since he's been in the league, right? Drafted just after the Super Bowl there and stuff like that. So he's kind of coming into that regime, and now it's just it's a big change. But what I like, and I agree with the OTAs, I'm not too concerned with, you know, how's this guy performing and all this kind of stuff. But it's just interesting to see, like, when just listening to Mike, and you're just kind of, you get excited that just the way, the confidence he's bringing out, the way he's saying, hey, we're just slowly bringing this in. He's almost admitting, like, I'm learning too. I'm, like you said, you know, like, I'm learning on the fly, but we're going to get this right. 20% of the defense is installed. And that's what you kind of getting excited about it. He's taking accountability as well. He talked about the quarterbacks, talked about Sam Howell, says, hey, he's got a lot to work on. So do I, right? So you kind of like to hear that, but at the same time, you're excited that he just seems like he's really dialed in. And with Pete, it was, just the predictability was just,
The
getting a little
perfect
too,
word for it, man. He was
right.
just predictable.
It was just too, and it was getting old. And again, no knock on Pete, right? We all love him for what he's done, but with Mike coming in here, you just get that sense of, just what is going to happen, like no predictability, right? And just taking seeing these guys out there and just feeling like I can just work with all these pieces, and that's what we get excited about with Mike here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the detail oriented nature of it is going to be the big thing. Something Bryce and I were talking about early is Seattle's just been so sloppy, especially on
Yeah.
defense, just undisciplined. And that's one thing I'm confident will be better this year.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing too. The defense was huge, right? It was one of those things, and that, like, I think we even talked about this last time you were on the show, where you know we were all talking about, hey, let's get an offensive minded coach. And then when you took a step back, you're like, wait a second, we have to clean this defense up. Like, it's predictable, it's sloppy, and like you said, that's not having discipline, right? So,
Right.
um, so when you see it now, and you get excited for a guy like Mike to come in here, and you just feel like, maybe it's not going to be 2024, but you feel like, just like you did in Baltimore, right? You took a defense that was pretty poor, you kind of got in the middle of the pack, and then all of a sudden they're number one in the league, and you feel like, we're accumulating a lot of pieces on our defense, right? So you get excited about it. I mean, I know you guys talked about, Byron Murphy, and you just kind of start there and be like, hey, wait a second, here's possibly an identity of our team here in this defensive line, and we're going to start with our 16th pick overall and bring in a dog like Murphy, and with a lot of other guys on the line. Like, I'm getting excited about this defense, and I'm not even worried too much about how we're gonna start or how we're gonna, really. You guys brought up a win total there, and 10 wins, you know 9 wins, and it's even tough to put a win total in. We can look at the schedule and stuff like that, but you just want to see how these guys are gonna start, adapting and start kind of, playing for Mike, right? You look at, say, Arizona down there and how they started playing for Gannon, and just kind of a sense of like, how are these guys gonna really kind of, take to Mike at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think I think that's a big deal. And then, as far as like individuals go, there's a player Bryce mentioned earlier that I've been really excited about seeing, hoping he makes a Boye Mafe type leap from year 1 to year 2, and that's Derek Hall. He's a player I
Yeah.
like a lot, coming out of college at Auburn, and he's a little bit undersized for an edge rusher, but he's got that motocross type of speed, right? Like, he's just so low to the ground. He can turn with that bend that I think is a big deal in the modern NFL. If he can make the jump, and maybe with McDonald's coaching, and then I think the other big thing is just going to be these linebackers. I think it's going to be Dodson and Baker who see the majority of the snaps, and they're players that, look, they got 1-year deals in free agency for a reason. They're not superstars, but analytics like them, both from coverage standpoints. I thought Jordan Brooks was a very good cover linebacker. I don't think Bobby Wagner is that anymore.
Yeah.
And I think teams really, really picked on Seattle's linebackers in their pass games, just running sail routes, just so many goddamn sail routes every single game. And sail routes require linebackers to go with typically a slot receiver and cover them for 30, 40 yards. And you're going to bet on the slot receiver to win that over a linebacker 10 times out of 10. And really the only way that you can compound that is disruption to the quarterback's timing. And Seattle's been pretty poor at generating that, unless they were going against really bad offensive linemen. So, I'll be interested to see how, Dodson and Baker both, like I say, profile as really good cover linebackers, whether they can get in there, stick their nose into the middle of a play the way that Wagner and Brooks did on on run plays. That I'm not sure, but that'll be really interesting for me to see. And then, of course, I want to see Witherspoon make that leap also. I think he was so good last year. I wouldn't have been surprised if he had won Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think he had a case for it, but there's also the potential that he sees a Reek Woolen-like regression in year 2, right? Like, we just always assume that players are going to continue to get better, and we forget the fact that the NFL is the fastest learning organism on planet Earth, and their teams are going to figure out what you don't do well. And very few rookies come in and have zero weaknesses. So teams are going to figure out how to attack Witherspoon the way they figured out how to attack Woolen. And the question is going to be, can the player and the coaches do enough to make the adjustments and counterpunch? So, but if Witherspoon can somehow be better this year than he was last year, I mean, we're talking about a real game changer.
Yeah, I agree. And the only thing that worries me about Witherspoon is just staying healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You talk about OTAs, just because he plays so much bigger than his size, right? Like, he's maybe 180, right? Like, who knows when they say 185, whatever. But I mean,
right.
Still he plays like he's 225 out there, right? But the one thing about, you talk about, Reek and him, the one thing that he has, though, just his football IQ just seems, for a guy that young to come in, just his instinct and his IQ is crazy. So that even if a player like has to make adjustments, a guy like that, you think, hey, okay, let's get in the film room. I got this, where he can adapt more than, say, the average young guy, which you can feel confident about. But I agree, man. I'm excited about Spoon taking that next leap. What about a guy that is yet to be seen in the wild because he was hurt, Mike Morris? Because that's a guy that I'm kind of excited to see, that could obviously depth and see what he can do out there. What do you think about Mike Morris this year?
Yeah, he was a player I liked when they drafted him. Again, you get those middle rounds, and if you get a day 3 guy that's still on the roster in year 3, that's a win, right? But yeah, I mean, you can't have enough guys in the trenches. And if I were to change any rules in the NFL, the first thing I would do is I'd expand game day rosters, and I'd let you dress like 55 guys instead of 46, but you can't. You only get to dress 46 plus an emergency quarterback. So I think most coaches, that if you did expand the number of guys that you could dress for game day, they'd put almost all of them, the extra guys on offensive and defensive line. And that is ultimately what you care about, from a depth standpoint, is those guys are going to get hurt and they're going to get tired. They can't play every snap, especially on the defensive line. Can this guy come in and not fuck things up? And I hope Morris is one of those guys, because I liked him in college.
Okay, guys. So I have kind of a hot take here, which I think will be kind of interesting for people, but I think there's a situation this year where Trey Brown ends up being the other starting corner for Seattle for a chunk of the year over Reek Woolen. And I think Trey Brown gets a little bit underrated value from people, because we do have Reek. He had that phenomenal rookie year. We got Witherspoon. He had a phenomenal rookie year. And Trey Brown, ever since coming back from that injury and actually getting his feet back underneath him, like last year, he had one of the highest grades as a corner, especially in press, which I think goes a bit underrated. I think Trey Brown ends up being in Seattle longer than Reek Woolen does for career-wise. That's my kind of hot take to before I go into my players that I'm super intrigued to watch going into the season. I think Trey Brown's going to be a huge piece of the Seattle defense that people don't realize. I think he fits a lot of what Mike McDonald likes to do defensively with his corners. He's aggressive. He'll tackle. He's phenomenal in coverage. He needs to get a couple more picks here. I think he'll be a bit more of a turnover guy, but I think he's going to push Reek for playing time right out of the gate in this defense. Another guy I'm interested in is Olu. I think Olu and Nick Harris's battle in camp for center is going to be a very interesting one, because Nick Harris actually, has the relationship with Scott Huff, obviously, and that coaching staff. I don't know if Brian Grubb had Nick Harris. I can't remember if he was there or not at the same time, but at least Scott Huff was. So I think he's going to be an interesting guy. And then I'm actually interested in watching Sam Howell and seeing what Sam Howell looks like and Gino as well, in Ryan Grubb's offense. And, what do we have in Sam Howell? Is it an upgrade over Drew Lock? Everyone assumes it is because Sam Howell did play last year. He's got, a lot of good things, but I'm interested to see, is it truly an upgrade over, what we had before as a backup quarterback? Those are the kind of the things I'm going to be interested, going into training camp and seeing what kind of shapes up out of that.
Yeah, I'd say to start with your first point, I think that, I love Trey Brown. I think he's a total dog. I think he's the type of player that every coach kind of wants to have on their team, and probably a player that a coach like Mike McDonald really does value. I think Rick Woolen is better. The difference is expectations are now higher for Rick Woolen. So if he struggles, the criticism is going to be louder. And I think that just because of the sheer size speed combination and how good he was as a rookie, that when you get to a point where you have to make a contract decision between the two, Rick Woolen is going to command more money, even if he's not excellent this year. I think that he's going to be a higher priority, in a free agency situation. And so he'd be more expensive to retain. But I think he's better than Trey Brown. And I say that as someone who likes Trey Brown. Olu is interesting. Center has obviously been a mess for Seattle, honestly, since the Max Unger trade. And I think the expectation is that it's his job to lose at center. But I mean, at the end of the day, you got to be able to do it. And I thought he had a couple of really nice games last year. I thought he was really good in the Dallas game against, what was the number 2 defense in the NFL at that time. And I mean, it would be my preference that Olu is the starting center, that he delivers on the glimpses of the promise that he showed last year. And then as far as the quarterbacks go, I like Sam Howell. I think that for the offense that assuming that Ryan Grubb is going to try and have similar concepts to what he had at UW, I think Gino is way, 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 way better at that than Sam Howell. Obviously, far more experienced and all that stuff. I think Sam Howell has a lot of talent, but I think he's pretty reckless, like Drew Lock. And maybe you can rein that in, but the demand on the throws, you look at the throws that were asked of Michael Penix last year, and sure, you can write him off and say, oh, he had a great offensive line. He had these 3 NFL receivers. Yeah, sure. But the passes that he was asked to make last year are high difficulty passes, and he was asked to make them in high leverage situations. And I think that's the strength of Gino's game. I do not think it's the strength of Sam Howell's game. I think that he has the arm talent to do it. But those are anticipation and trust throws. And I have not seen that from Howell. I didn't see it from Locke either. I think Howell and Locke are probably very similar in terms of talent and play style. It's just that Howell is younger and, a lot cheaper. And so I think that's really what it comes down to at that one. And I'm open to having my mind changed. I mean, if Sam Howell comes out and lights the preseason on fire, sure, let's have a discussion. But, the difference between being a top 12 quarterback that I'm pretty confident Gino is, and being good enough to start in the NFL, but kind of in the bottom third, is massive. It is so huge. And I think the gap between what we've seen from Gino and what we've seen from Sam Howell is just gigantic.
No, I agree with you there, Jackson, on the gap. And to start, this offseason when they made the trade and everything, I was kind of okay, maybe this is going to be a bit of a competition. Pete's gone, who was a big Gino advocate and, huge Gino fan. Does this mean, because Gino, in both of his years, I love Gino. We both love Gino. He's never put a full season of straight play together. He's had kind of these good first half, rocky back half, bad start to a year, or mediocre start, and then excellent finish to the year. I want to see him put it all together for 1 year and just be consistent as much as he can all the way through. And yes, he's going to have up and down games, but have them where they're far and few between rather than clustered into a 4-game span or something like that. It was actually kind of interesting. We had Lofa Tatupu on our show a while back, and I was trying to figure out the best way to describe how I view this situation from John Schneider's perspective, bringing in Sam Howell, having an established veteran like Gino, who is quite good. It reminds me, and I think Sam Howell may be better in the long run than Drew Lock, and I think he could viably be an option if you can, like you said, rein in some of these issues and correct some of this stuff because he is so young. And I think part of his issue in Washington was the fact he had a horrible coaching staff around him. I look at it like when Trent Dilfer was here and we traded for Matt Hasselbeck. And that's a while back. So some people may not even remember that situation, but we got Holmgren brought in Dilfer, and then we brought in Matt and let Matt sit and learn. And then they kind of handed the reins over eventually to Matt Hasselbeck for that, 10-year plus period where he was Seattle's starter. I look at Gino as an upgraded Dilfer in a way where he gives you more than what Trent gave you, but he's a great guy for Sam to learn from and to grow and to go through this whole process. So we talk about, when Seattle going to draft a quarterback. We've had that discussion, me and Ryan. I think there's a good chance Seattle can kick this can down the road till 2027, 2028 if they want to, and re-sign both of these quarterbacks to, 2-year extensions to keep that kind of going and see, when does the wheels fall off Gino, and then we hand the keys over to Sam.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I think also it's just the NFL has learned over the last 2 years that you need competence at your backup quarterback. I really don't think the Sam Howell acquisition was any more than that. I think it's about having an affordable, competent backup quarterback. Last year, 67 different quarterbacks started NFL games, which broke the previous year's record of 62. Despite the NFL's best efforts at protecting the quarterback, they're getting hurt a lot. And it is almost a statistical certainty that your backup is going to start at least one game in the NFL. And you need that guy to not suck. The Chargers went from being exciting to unwatchable when you go from Justin Herbert to Easton Stick, right? Like,
so bad.
You can't, it just sucks. And there's not 67 good NFL quarterbacks out there. So Sam Howell is probably around the middle of that. He's probably the 30-something best quarterback in the NFL, and that's great to have as your backup. But that's what it is to me. I mean, does the avenue exist for him to come out and, maybe it's a Jordan Love type situation where it takes a while to really learn the nuances, and then all of a sudden he grasps it and bang, you got your quarterback of the future. Awesome. Like, that would be great. I'm not rooting against that by any stretch. I don't think that's what it was. I was looking at Seattle taking like a Spencer Rattler type pick 78, and I think Howell is essentially that, and that's why they traded that pick for him. He's young enough, and it's easy to forget that going into his junior year in college, a lot of people were projecting Sam Howell to be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. He was that kind of player coming out of high school and showed that kind of promise early in college. He's just reckless. He's just a really reckless quarterback, and we'll see. That is something that can be coached. I won't say out of you, because you don't want to stop taking risks. Like, Gino takes a lot of risks as a quarterback. He's just so proficient at making tight window throws to the second and third level that you kind of trust him. And he's had enough battle, reps in real battle to kind of know what to look for. And with Sam Howell, you don't have that yet. But I'm super comfortable with him as the backup. If you were to rank all of the backup quarterbacks in the NFL, Sam Howell is probably, top 5, top 6. And so I feel good about that. If, I don't see quarterback as a big position need for Seattle. I think there's probably still a lot of air in the tires on Geno Smith. And, I think Geno is very, very good and very capable of winning playoff games with a good team around him and all that kind of thing. So, it'll be interesting. And Sam Howell is young enough to still evolve into something different than what he is right now.
Yeah, no, we've been back and forth with the Sam Howell thing too. At first we were like, okay, interesting move. Obviously Drew Lock, they need to fill the gap there. So at the first thought, it's like, okay, well, there's a backup. But then you kind of say, hey, you know what? He played pretty good against us when we played the Commanders. And it was like, okay, here's a young guy, not the best organization. They made him throw a lot and all this kind of stuff. hey, he comes in here with our pieces and better weapons, and maybe he can compete for Geno. But as you sort of look at it and you say, no, you know what, we've kind of looked at it too, where it's Geno's job to lose, no question about it. But you're right, man. It's just like you look at it, and he's definitely an upgrade in our opinion to Drew Lock, right? So if Geno does go down, like you said, you feel confident with the team you got that Sam can come in and still keep your head above water, and
That's
that you're
right.
not, hey, I'm not. Oh, season's done, right? Now
Exactly.
let's just look for next year, right? Which, and you're right, it's crazy. It's insane the QB protection in this league and the amount of guys that are going down. It. I mean, look at Aaron Rodgers. I mean, talking about a 40-year-old guy, but first couple series, and there you go. I mean, Zach was supposed to be your guy, but who is they were the Jets, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what do you think then long term. I know you say that's not a need, and I agree, because we look at 24 as like this big building block, and to 25, 26, and okay, let's go really get to try to chase some Super Bowls here, or get close to. What do you think, as far as if you say you looked in the future, as far as when they might think of drafting a guy? Because we think, because they didn't draft a guy this year, because we thought, like you said, you brought up the name Spencer Rattler. We thought they were going to maybe grab Rattler in the middle rounds there, especially when he was still available. And now you look at next season, that we could be in the same drafting position, right? Based on our team, 8, 9, 10 wins. So then you're going to be in that same spot. Top guys are going to go. When do you see them maybe even looking at a quarterback? You think it's like, okay, hey, the wheels are falling off, or do you want to wait that long? Like, say you brought up with Jordan Love, where it's like Aaron Rodgers was still playing great football, and here they go and draft a guy in the first round of Jordan Love, and people were freaking out. And now you see how Jordan Love's playing. Do you want to wait that long before the wheels fall off? Do you say, let's get a young guy in here sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I'm a little counterculture in that I'm okay with using high draft capital on a quarterback that isn't going to start right away, because that's how it was done for a really long time. And some of the best quarterbacks of all time didn't start right away. And I don't, there's only been one team that hasn't had to worry about their starting quarterback in 30 years. That's the Packers. And what they do, they drafted Aaron Rodgers in the first round, so had him for 3 years. They drafted Jordan Love in the first round, so had him for 3 years. But I mean, there's real opportunity cost to not taking someone that is going to play in the first couple of years with your first round pick. Like, it's a huge gamble in and of itself. But I do think a lot of teams have set themselves up for years of struggle by forcing the issue and feeling like, well, we have to get a quarterback. Our quarterback isn't good enough to win a Super Bowl. Listen, motherfucker, if you don't have Patrick Mahomes, then like, whatever, your argument is draft Patrick Mahomes. Like, look at the Bengals, look at the Bills, right? Like, Matthew Stafford's been one of the 5, 6 best quarterbacks in the NFL for like 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
And it took him till year 11 with an insane roster around him and a team that basically punted 5 years worth of first round picks and wrote an NFL record number of guaranteed contracts in order to him to win a Super Bowl. Like, winning a Super Bowl is really fucking difficult to do. And if your measure for whether the quarterback you have is good enough is, well, can they win a Super Bowl? Then I guess the Eagles need to find a new quarterback, and the Bengals need to find a new quarterback, and the Bills need to find a new quarterback. Like, it's just not, this is a miserable way to watch football, in my opinion. So I think Seattle is set. Like, problem is they're not probably going to be in a position to take like a top quarterback in the next couple of years. There's nothing about this team that makes me think they're going to be drafting in the top 5 or 10 here in the next couple of years. And so, do you trade for that guy? Do you give whatever the next iteration of Kirk Cousins is a big contract? Do you draft a guy in the middle rounds and hope he becomes the next Dak Prescott or Russell Wilson? Like, it's just really tough. But I also don't love the idea of going out and like forcing an early pick or spending a ton of money on like the quarterbacks that really are great. They don't become available. Like, they don't. Teams fucking sign him. And it's why Jared Goff is the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Like, Jared Goff is Geno Smith. And it's like, you got that guy and you have a team around him that you think is good enough. You keep that guy there. Starting over is just too hard. And, I talk a lot about opportunity cost. Well, okay. All right. Reset, we'll be good in a couple of years. We'll get this new quarterback. Well, okay. If you're the Seahawks, then you're punting a year or two of DK Metcalf's prime. You're punting a year or two of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet and Abe Lucas and Devin Witherspoon and Charles Cross and Uchenna Nwosu and the end of Leonard Williams' contract and the first 2 years of Byron Murphy's contract. Like, slow rebuilds don't fucking work very often in the NFL. And that's not something that as fans you should be hoping your team does. So, in my opinion. So all of that is a long-winded way to say that, like, I wouldn't force the quarterback situation. If I'm Seattle, your goal is to be, in my opinion, one of the 8 best teams in the NFL. And if you're one of the 8 best teams in the NFL, you have a chance to win the Super Bowl. And unfortunately, Patrick Mahomes exists. I mean, ask the Ravens, ask the 49ers, right? Like, it is what it is. If you haven't had Brady or Mahomes in the last 20 years, you're probably not winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, Jackson, I kind of agree with you. Like, and thankfully, Joe Burrow is back for Cincinnati, and he's the only one that's so far dethroned Patrick Mahomes besides Tom Brady that 1 year. So maybe he can do it again for us this year. But no, the way I look at next year's draft, even with the quarterbacks, I've already started to dive into it a bit, is there is a caveat for Seattle potentially to get one next year, just because if you look at a lot of teams across the NFL right now, a lot of guys, we saw 6 quarterbacks go in the first round this year. So there's 6 teams that are not necessarily going to be going and getting a quarterback next year. A lot of the other teams that were above them also have quarterbacks, like Houston. They've got, CJ Stroud. Carolina is not going to punt on Bryce Young after 1 year. Even our division, every team is going. The only one that may be in the same boat as us is maybe the Rams look at somebody because Stafford's getting older. Right. So there could be a situation for Seattle next year where if they're picking between, say, 15 and 25, there could be a Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers that ends up sitting there for them where they can take that guy and, like you said, sit him for 3 years behind Geno. If Sam Howell doesn't work out, go that route. But I'm of the same boat as you where it's better to draft a guy, not have to play him right away, and let him develop than it is to, hey, let's do Carolina's thing. Let's sell our whole farm to go up and get Bryce Young and have it kind of blow up in our face because we have no other pieces around him.
Yeah, and that trade set them back 4 years.
Yeah, it exactly did. And you look at what Chicago's now done in return with Caleb Williams. They've gone out. They've got some weapons around the guy. They've started to build their offensive line. So Caleb Williams might have a decent shot of being competitive this year. Not saying Chicago, is going to be lighting the world on fire, but at least be somewhat competitive. And I think people tend to forget when we got Russ, yes, we took Russell in the 3rd round, but we also had an established team at the time. Russell wasn't asked to be the guy that we saw in his quote-unquote prime. And when we did have Russell Wilson in his prime, we weren't going to Super Bowls. We had so many flaws on the rest of our roster that Russell couldn't make up for.
That's right.
And inevitably, it caused us to have, our now rebuild. I'm in the agreement. I think Geno's a top, 10 to 12 quarterback in the league. I think Ryan Grubb's offense suits him a lot better than Shane Waldron's if it's what I think it's going to be.
I agree with that a lot.
I think there's going to be a very good chance that Geno Smith might be at the end of this year. I think if you look at the power rankings of quarterbacks, Geno is going to be 6 to 8. I think he's going to make a big jump in that regard as long as he can stay healthy this year and we can protect him, solidify that inside of that O-line. I think there's a good chance that Geno Smith might actually jump and surprise a lot of people. And I think Seattle, if he does do that, I think there's going to be a good chance Seattle gives him a contract extension at some point this year to lower his cap hit going forward and reward him for that.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm in agreement with you, especially guys reaching, teams reaching. It's just, as a franchise, even we talked about, we went down the list of the top 6 guys, and you look at a team like, teams that are just so many holes in it, a team like New England, right? And you bring in a guy like Drake May, and you just see it from the outside looking in, and you're just like, man, this is this is probably a situation where, like I look at like the Bryce Young situation, where it's just a team that, like, even though Bryce was the guy, like, build your team up first, right? And I think that's why when you look at the Hawks, and we're fine with Geno, we're fine with him moving forward, right? And we just you kind of want best of both worlds, where you kind of got a guy waiting in the wings, and when it's time to hand it over, you hand it over. But I agree, and I think to Bryce's point, one of the biggest things is, as long as that, if it's, Scott Huff's got a job in his hands with some of the young guys on that O line and some of the moving pieces. So I think that's going to be a real determining factor with that interior O line, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm high on Christian Haynes, but again, rookie, right? Center. If Oldie wins the job, against Nick Harris, essentially, yeah, he was in the system, but almost a rookie. He played one start, right? So it's there's a lot of question marks with that O line still, right? Even though you kind of might get excited about some of the pieces, but some of the guys went out the door too. So that's got to be the concern still, with Geno moving forward, and that's not Geno's fault. It's just about how much time and protection he's got in that pocket. But hey, Jackson, moving forward here, looking at the schedule, right? Just want to touch on the schedule a little bit with you and get some of your thoughts with the 2024 sched. Bryce and I have touched on it, and it's we like it. We like it. It's you got some teams on there, obviously, with some question marks at quarterback and potentially starting rookies. I mean, you don't know for sure, but you look at the first couple teams that we have on the sched with Denver and New England, potentially two brand new quarterbacks, and then you look a little further down when we have the Falcons. Who knows? Maybe we're seeing Penix if Cousins. Yeah, I mean, you're probably going to see Cousins, but that's going to be interesting. Then even later in the year with Minnesota, you could potentially see another rookie QB. How are you looking at the schedule? Do you like it? Is it favorable? What are you seeing from there? What do you especially for, like, I look at it like, it's our opportunity to get on a hot start. Like those first few games, we could, hey, let's, and then you can maybe have some hiccups from there. But
yeah, I mean, I think you look at it, the expectation, and you really hope this team starts out 2-0, and I like that, two of the projected worst teams that they're going to play all season are right out of the gate, because when you have a new coach, you want to get those positive vibes, and you want to get the players believing in the message. And trust me when I say, the guys in the locker room aren't going to be like, oh, the Broncos aren't supposed to be that good this year, so this win doesn't mean anything. No, fucking winning is everything, man. That's all that matters to these guys. And winning creates good vibes. Like, I think we all want to believe, and I think that there's something to it. You see in all the sports movies and the inspirational, the team comes together and then they start winning. It's been my experience, and I think it's the experience of most pro athletes, that winning creates good vibes, not necessarily the other way around. Like hopefully you build something where the vibes are, and I think the Lions are an example of the exception, where they just built really great vibes and that translated to winning. But I think more often than not, it's winning that creates good vibes. So getting a couple wins out of the gate would be huge. Honestly, my two favorite games on the schedule are the two right after that. It's the Dolphins, and then it's the Lions on Monday night. And I think that's going to be a really great test for Mike McDonald's defense, because I think those are two of the best offenses in the NFL. And, hopefully, good performances against what should be two bad offenses in the first two games has the team feeling really good. But Miami and Detroit are both really great offenses in that they're excellent at identifying pressure points for a defense, and then just hammering those soft spots over and over and over and over again. And it's one of the things that makes Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan great, is they're not afraid to just keep going back to the same play if it's working. And Miami and Detroit will be really, really great tests for them. So I think those two games are probably the most interesting to me on the schedule outside of the division. I think, I always say I'm a football fan first and a Seahawks fan second. I look at the schedule after the first two games, And it's like the Dolphins are very interesting. I mean, the Dolphins, I think, are the most entertaining team in the NFL on offense. And then you get the Lions, Giants, whatever, that should be a win. Niners are tough. Falcons going to be a super fascinating team this year. I think that offense is going to be really good. Then you get the Bills and the Rams and the Niners and the Cardinals, and then the Jets if Rodgers is healthy. Bryce and I talked about the Cardinals already, and I think they're going to be really good on offense. And then the Packers, and then the Vikings, and McCarthy should have a handle on that Kevin O'Connell offense with Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson at that point. Then you get the Bears and the Rams. Like, it's pretty goddamn relentless after the Giants game in terms of the quarterbacks they play. Like, that is a gauntlet. And look, if this was a Pete Carroll coach defense, I'd be like, Seahawks are going to be like bottom 3 in yards and maybe points allowed, facing 13 straight quarterbacks like that. But I mean, McDonald had the best offenses in the NFL in hell last year. I mean, what he did to the 49ers on Christmas was insane. 5 turnovers, just complete domination, right? I mean, they absolutely shut down the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. And like, they beat the Rams, they beat McDonald's record against Shanahan and McVay is awesome. It's like 5-1. And so, like, I'm hoping I like that all the bad quarterbacks that they're going to face, which I think is like only 3 of them on this entire 17-game schedule, are all in the first 5 games, because it's going to, when the defense is still learning itself and learning the new system, it's going to be a little bit of a softer landing spot, but they're going to have their shit together down the stretch, because there's no breaks. I mean, barring injuries to those starting quarterbacks, it's like nothing but top 12, top 15 quarterbacks for the last 3 months of the season, 4 months of the season. It's insane.
Yeah, I know. Looking at that schedule, Jackson, like, I'm going to be going to the Miami game because it's kind of an interesting team to go and watch and play, like you said, offensively. But you look at basically from October 10th to December 22nd, that is probably one of the, we talked about the gauntlet last year, those 4 games that we had. That's a string of 3/4 of your entire season is now a gauntlet, because you've got Detroit, you've got San Fran, the Falcons, and then you're home to the Bills and the Rams before you get a bye, only to come out of the bye again and play the 49ers in Santa Clara. Cardinals aren't going to be easy. You get the Jets in between the 2 games with them, and then you're home to play Green Bay. Like, that's going to be, a nightmare for any team, realistically, if they're not on their cues. The one thing I will say, though, that I like, yes, the Miami game offensively is going to be tough for our defense, but I don't look at Miami's defense and go, that's a scary unit, especially with them losing Christian Wilkins and Van Ginkel this year, because I think those 2 guys are huge to their success last year. So for me, what I'm kind of happy about with that first chunk of the schedule is I think it's going to allow Mike McDonald and this defense to gel, at least get kind of some sort of baseline of how they're going to play ball, how they're going to communicate, get some of the kinks out before they take on that gauntlet with the 49ers on October 10th and starting. So, yeah, like, I look at that. I think Seattle wins more away games this year than they do home games, just based on who they're playing, which is a crazy thing to say, but I think that's the way this kind of ends up going for Seattle this year.
Yeah, I mean, the flip side of the coin is they don't, outside of their division, they don't play a lot of great defenses, right? Like,
no,
Broncos defense doesn't scare me. Patriots defense doesn't scare me. Dolphins defense doesn't scare me. Lions defense doesn't scare me. Giants defense doesn't scare me. Falcons defense doesn't scare me. Bills defense doesn't scare me. Like, those are Packers defense, Vikings defense, Bears defense. Those are not scary defenses. So I think Seattle's offense has the chance to look really, really good this year and put up some like real numbers. So that part of it is exciting.
Yeah, no, that is exciting. And actually, that's something we talked about before. Like, before, year prior was like, you looked at the weapons on offense and you said, pick your poison and let's just sort of have a middle of the road defense. So, if the offense this year coming obviously with Grubb's offensive scheme and can get rolling, and you talk about confidence, right? Well, here's an opportunity the first couple games for the offense to get, their confidence going. And then with Mike's, insertion of this new defensive scheme, get these guys confidence and learning. And then, hey, you don't have to be the number one defense. Let's just be 15 to 20 to start off. That's a lot better than bottom of the league, right? And I think, like you said, if this was Pete Carroll's defense, you'd be like, man, we're gonna we're gonna have some problems, right? So it's that's gonna be interesting to see that offense just kind of really gain their confidence and get rolling. And if the defense can just kind of grow and learn and be okay, I mean, we can stay competitive. And I think that's for us, the way we look at it, that's what this year's kind of going to be all about. It's just kind of like, how is this team finishing this season, going into 25 and say, okay, now we kind of know what we have, right? From players on defense with the coaching and guys buying in, right? So, like you said, it's going to be, it's not an easy sked. It's tough, but there's, some defensive weaknesses that you can be like, hey, we can do some damage against. Jacson, we love hanging out with you, man. Love having you on the show again. You come on, you're almost a regular now. So
no, I love it, fellas. It's open invite. I'm always excited to come talk ball with you guys. So I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, man, keep doing what y'all are doing.
For sure. But before we let you go, man, wanted to just again let everybody know, everyone watching the channel here, what you got going on and where they can find all your stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. I got my own show called Cigar Thoughts, and yeah, we light up stogies, and talk football, and a lot of it is Seahawks centric. So you can find that anywhere you get your podcast. Find that on YouTube, on Twitter, easy. At Jacson Bevens. There's no K in my name. That's Jacson. And yeah, you can see my brain dumps there. And then, of course, during the season, I write the Cigar Thoughts article after every Seahawks game. It's just kind of my take on what went down. So, yeah, anybody listening, you want to check that out, I'd appreciate it. And but other than that, man, everyone listening, you already know you're listening to a good show. So I look forward to the next opportunity to come on.
Hey, we appreciate that. So, guys, yeah, go definitely check out Cigar Thoughts because Jacson, we appreciate it again, and we'll definitely be chopping up in the future with you.
Yeah, look forward to it, guys. I appreciate y'all.
All right, man. Take care. Hey, guys, that was Jacson Bevens joining us again on the show, man. It's like I said, man, he's becoming a regular on the show, which is awesome because you love chopping up ball with him every time he comes on. Just awesome insights from him, and talking quarterbacks, and talking to a couple guys, and you and I have touched on it quite a bit, but looking at it, and a lot of guys really confident in Geno, moving forward and really taking control of this team and just trying to be that. We've had 2 years of them now. Like you've mentioned, you brought up, hey, the first year had a hot start, not a great finish. Last year, not a great start and a great finish. Let's put it all together. So this guys are confident that, hey, he can do it now. And especially you got a staff. We're confident with Mike. Ryan Grubb yet to be seen coming from a college game, but so it's interesting, but great take and tons of confidence from Jacson with Geno there.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the more, man, that I've dug into it, and I know, we've had some people that listen to our show say that, we've kind of gone back and forth between,
right,
Geno and Sam. Look, I love Geno Smith. I've loved Geno Smith since day one that he came into Seattle and, took over as the starter. So, for me, I really want to see Geno succeed. The more I've dug into what I think Ryan Grubb's going to do for Seattle's offense, the more that I'm able to say I think it fits Geno's skill set a hell of a lot better than Shane Waldron's.
Oh, yeah.
And what they asked him to do. I think, and in some respects, Shane Waldron's system, not Shane Waldron, but Sean McVay's system, which Shane Waldron's a derivative of, has changed so much over the years. Like when he got Stafford, they opened things up.
Right.
They weren't the same team they were before. Jared Goff goes off to Detroit and plays under Ben Johnson, which isn't anything like the Sean McVay system. Jared Goff's now one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. I think there is a very good chance that Geno Smith is going to get another contract in Seattle, because I think Geno Smith is going to have kind of not a bounce back year, but I think Geno Smith's going to have a complete year from start to finish. I don't know, man. I think with what their weapons that they've got, the way Grubb is very creative, and he's a different creative than what we've seen in the NFL. There hasn't been a Ryan Grubb. There isn't some kind of tree off the Ryan Grubb offense, really. In college there is, but not in the NFL. So I think it could be very interesting to see, what happens with Geno and that offense. I think Sam Howell, Jacson kind of sees him as a backup, and I think a lot of people do. I have a little bit more, thought that Sam's more than that. I think Sam could be more than that. I think he does need to sit for a year or two and learn and take that proper mentorship. But Sam's also an alpha dude, and he's going to push to play. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I think that's going to be one of the more intriguing things throughout camp, even though it may not be a true battle, is to see what do we get out of Sam Howell in the preseason? Is he lighting it up? Like, what's going to happen there?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And you bring up Goff. He brought up Goff actually, and you forgot. You almost forget about the contract he signed because I think we were talking. I think it was Rob, but he was like, can this guy? This is before the contract was signed. Can Goff get the Lions to where they want to be? Because you look at it, and I think you and I talked about similar. You have a similar quarterback. The difference is that Lions offensive line. Right.
Yeah.
And enabling them to be a little more successful. And so that's why you say, hey, well, wait a sec, you get Geno a little better offensive line, which they're trying to do, and it's not magic, right? It's going to take some time. So that's going to be some question marks. He has just the ability, right? And so, but you look at the money that they paid Goff, so then you're sitting back, like we've looked at and say, okay, you know what? Right now we have a pretty good quarterback at a pretty good number, and you bring up Sam. Might not be a comp right now, but it is intriguing because he's an alpha male, he's the alpha dog in his mind that it's going to eat him up to sit. And hey, but I'm sitting and I'm learning, and I'm going to be the starter here. So you can get excited about that too. I brought up drafting a guy to sit. Well, maybe you do got that. Maybe you do have that guy, and the Seahawks think that too. Doesn't mean it's going to work. Doesn't mean it's going to pan out. But they might think, hey, we have our guy that's going to sit 1 or 2 seasons, and then look out, right? And he's already had a taste of the NFL. He started for the Commanders, every game, so he's already had that taste. Bring up the picks, bring up the all that other kind of stuff, but he's done it. So it's like, okay, now take a step back, sit, learn, veteran, and then you're going to be ready. And so that could also be a situation that's going to be exciting to see. And then when we touch schedule there with Jacson, he brings up some good points. You kind of look at it. It's the problem with it too is that you're always going to have those 6 division games that no matter if you have Denver and New England at the first 2 of your schedule, 6 games is a big chunk of your season, right? So it's like, and our division is tough now. So, you want to talk about gauntlet. When you talked about gauntlet and we talked gauntlet last year, who was in the middle of that gauntlet? The Niners. And they're always going to be there. The Rams, the Cardinals are going to be better. So you're going to have these teams. It's not like, when New England was so dominant, you look at that division, it was trash. We're not going to have that luxury. It'd be nice, right? You could have a team. Okay, well, you have New England and Denver on your schedule, and then you have a trashy division. Well, right there, you could be like, okay, we're going to win 8 or 9, and then whatever happens, maybe we win 11 and 12. So that's kind of the tough part that makes, and of course, you got some competitive teams in there and some good teams. So it's going to be interesting. I'm just excited because it can go either way. Like you said, there's intriguing games. The Dolphins are intriguing. How is Mike going to go against these powerhouse offenses? The Dolphins Alliance, right? So it's going to be fun to watch week to week with this sched. So, and you know what the crazy thing about the schedule, you're getting a bit of everything. You really are.
No, agreed. You really are. It's going to be a bit of a stretch here, and we're definitely going to see kind of what this team is going to be like through that stretch. How are they going to respond to not having Pete Carroll in that tough days? How's it going to be? How's Mike McDonald going to respond as a head coach when maybe things don't go right for 2 or 3 games. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this team handles that, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah. Yeah, man, we're all excited. I'm at the point now where I'm just like, let's get camp going. Let's like, we're not far, man. When you think about it, like we're rolling right into junior, like
Yep.
that. It is quick. So just let's sit back and enjoy it. Let's just enjoy the process here because you know how quick the season's going. But I think how the season goes. But yeah, I'm just you and I are excited. Everyone's getting excited. So again, guys, Jacson Bevens joining us again tonight, man. Make sure you guys go over and check out his stuff because honestly, he knows football, and you talk about he talks to some great football minds over there. So go check him out. Cigar Thoughts with Jacson Bevens, and yeah, and as far as us, man, we appreciate it, you guys tuning in, and that's it for us tonight, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. What a run. Marshawn Lynch. Get off me.
DK. Hey, it's Josh Harris with Seattle Seahawks.